Some of the members have also asked how we set the eligibility criteria for our social schemes. Mr. Edwin Tong and Mr. Murali Pillai asked if our means testing criteria are sufficiently flexible to accommodate diverse circumstances. Associate Professor Randolph Tan asked if our schemes can be made more targeted. The queries raised by the three members reflect the wide and diverse views on how social schemes can be designed. In designing our social schemes, we are guided by a few key principles. First, what is the objective of the scheme? If it is a scheme to support the needy, the eligibility criteria will be set to target the intended beneficiaries. If it is meant to benefit more, the criteria will have to be set for a broader coverage. Second, is the scheme design fair and progressive? We want to make sure that those with less receive more support. But at the same time, we want to design the scheme in a way that does not erode our societal values of family and community support, and more importantly, the value of a strong work ethic that Singaporeans share. Third, is the scheme sustainable? We have a responsibility to ensure that each generation does not burden the next with unsustainable spending. That is why we have schemes with different objectives to support Singaporeans in different circumstances and with different needs. This is our approach of providing gradated tiers of support so that every Singaporean can benefit from our social schemes in one way or another. We have schemes that support strategic objectives such as better education and health outcomes. These cover all Singaporeans regardless of income or wealth. Those with lower incomes receive more assistance, which should be the case, but Singaporeans across the board receive some support. For example, eligibility for the Skills Future Credit, the Pioneer Generation Package, and the Marriage and Parenthood Package is not dependent on income or wealth. For schemes such as childcare, education, and some healthcare subsidies, all Singaporeans can receive benefits, but those with lower incomes generally receive more assistance, which should be the case. We also have schemes that are more targeted. Some provide benefits not just to the lower income, but also the middle income. For example, subsidies for housing and intermediate and long-term care. Others are more tightly scoped for those who need more help. These can range from MOE's Financial Assistance Scheme, the Workfare Income Supplement, and the Silver Support Scheme. By the way, the Silver Support Scheme is not for all HDB dwellers, but only for seniors who have had low income through life and now have little family support. Likewise, ComCare and Medifund are safety nets for those in need. Associate Professor Tan spoke about the broad coverage of the GST voucher. The GST voucher has different components, each with a different objective. For instance, the GSTV cash payment is meant to help the lower income offset some of the cost of daily living. The eligibility criteria are deliberately set such that coverage is broader than schemes like ComCare and Medifund, which target only the very needy. In this way, we can cover more Singaporeans with lower income. Meanwhile, the GSTV YouSave is meant to help both lower and middle income households offset some of their utilities expenses. By extending the benefit of eligible HDB households, we cover about 70% of properties, including the middle income group. If we put together all our different social schemes, we have a progressive social system where support is extended to all, but those with greater need receive more. I agree with Professor Tan's caution that we need to avoid a creep towards all schemes giving something for everyone. By careful design, we can have a system that is sustainable. Mr. Murali and Mr. Edwin Tong raised thoughtful points about our current means testing system. Broadly speaking, our means testing criteria consider income or wealth or a combination of both in order to determine how much support to give. For some schemes, we also consider the number of dependents in a household with per capita means testing criteria. This is fair and helps us target our schemes at those who need more assistance. Nonetheless, we recognize that no criterion is perfect. Each come with trade-offs. For instance, a wealth criterion that requires an individual to report his personal savings may be a more accurate assessment of his wealth, but that would require the citizen to apply for benefits rather than to receive them automatically. The annual value of property criterion, which does not need to be separately reported, allows us to deliver benefits automatically. Different trade-offs arise with other means testing criterion. I thank Mr. Murali-Pillay for pointing out the limitations of using household income and for his suggestion to migrate to family means testing. Even if data analytics can map our family trees based on administrative data like births, deaths, marriages, and divorces, it may not fully capture family relationships, which can be complex and fluid, and the government is also not privy to the family dynamics. Hence, to date, the household income remains the best available proxy for family support. But we will keep in mind good and practical ideas on how to improve on this, and I thank the members for their suggestions. There is another benefit of household means testing. It enables us to make it more convenient for Singaporeans to benefit from our social schemes, as applicants do not then need to provide information on family members who do not stay with them. Mr. Edwin Tong also spoke about schemes that do not apply to those who live in private housing. Our underlying principle is to provide support according to need, and those in private housing are generally better off than those in public housing. Nevertheless, there are schemes which extend to those in private housing. For example, all Singaporeans, including those who live in private housing, can receive retraining support, subsidies for inpatient and outpatient care, and preschool and education subsidies. Education can be quite significant. For instance, a child entering primary school in 2016 would stand to benefit from over $100,000 in today's terms in education subsidies by the time he or she completes secondary school. With post-secondary education, it is even more. When property is taken into consideration, many schemes consider the annual value, or AV, with a threshold of $13,000 and or $21,000. The AV is reviewed annually. An AV threshold of $13,000 already covers all HDB flats, while the AV threshold of $21,000 covers about 80% of residential properties, including some lower value private properties. This means only those who live in private properties with AVs in the top 20% are excluded. In short, while there is always room for improvement, what we have today is a system that is fair and inclusive. At the same time, we exercise flexibility and will consider appeals on a case-by-case basis. Those in genuine need of help will receive help. Mr. Edwin Tong highlighted cases in which a resident may be living in a private property under extenuating circumstances, for instance, renting only one room or living with friends in a private property on goodwill terms. For these, if they have specific needs, the best approach would be to appeal to the relevant agencies, which will consider the various appeals on a case-by-case basis and on their merits. There may also be schemes at a constituency level that can be tapped on, and these can be checked at the respective constituency offices. Mr. Edwin Tong has also highlighted that HDB dwellers receive on average about 4 times the amount of government transfers when compared to private estate dwellers in 2016. I would like to clarify that this is correct if you compare the transfers received by 1- and 2-room HDB flat residents with those living in private properties. That is a reflection of our progressive system. But if you take into account other 3, 4, 5-roomers, then the percentage is different, or the ratio is different. We have been able to achieve good social outcomes, including when compared to other countries. So, for example, we have one of the highest home ownership rates in the world. More than 90% of Singaporeans, including many young Singaporeans, are homeowners. Compare this to Britain, for example, where the rate of home ownership among those aged 25 to 34 years has fallen by about 20% in the past decade, from 59% to 37%. Our education system provides our students with a good foundation. Our students consistently do well in many international education rankings. But besides developing our students intellectually, we have also placed a lot of emphasis on values and character development as part of holistic education. Our healthcare system is recognized for providing good quality and affordable care in a sustainable way. The Bloomberg Healthcare Efficiency Index, which considers life expectancy and total healthcare cost per capita and as a percentage of GDP, places us near the top consistently. We don't claim to have the best system, but we have done quite well over the years. Going forward, we will need to manage rising healthcare costs while helping older Singaporeans age well. The government will continue to improve our social programs and schemes to foster a caring and inclusive society. But the government cannot achieve this outcome alone. As the Finance Minister has stressed in his budget speech, we will need to work in partnership with community organizations and individuals, especially since many of our social challenges are complex and multidimensional.